Now it's time to introduce you to Fee, a mental health peer worker, counsellor and advocate. Fee is a parent to 3 beautiful young adults, passionate about social justice issues and an ardent lover of all things related to the arts. Often found absorbed in rehearsals for a show, riding across a range of genres, preparing for voice exams and choral concerts, or lost in thought, wandering the streets of the Central West, headphones blaring, musical theatre inspiration. Fee Peel is now going to step up to the mic. Welcome her.
That's very high. I'm not that high. When I came to Bathurst at the start of this year, I realised for the first time in my life I had a chance to truly reinvent myself. I knew no one here apart from my daughter who was studying at CSU. I'd lived the majority of my life in a small town on the south coast of New South Wales. There, as my mental health had eclipsed my life, I became defined by it, in the eyes of friends and family, in the eyes of the community, in my own eyes. Relative anonymity can be a powerful antidote to infamy. Here in Bathurst, I discovered a world that took me as untainted and saw me for the things that I was beyond the blackness of mental illness. I discovered within me long, dormant dreams and desires that I was finally able to begin to give voice to. I started singing again. I started writing. I returned to the world of the theatre. I became in community volunteering, advocacy and social justice causes in a way that I had never been able to do before. Fragments of myself, false starts and postponed projects all started to come together into a whole that I had never dreamed possible. I had lived with a 3-monthly suicidal cycle for almost 14 years, arising when my first marriage began to fall apart. Over the years, I had learned to manage it, and I had come to accept this dark companion and its regular visits. When it reared its head again in April, I came through relatively unscathed. But when it returned, between the Meet the Producers meetings and auditions for this show, it was a whole lot worse. This time, due to a range of COVID-related external stresses that no one could have predicted. As I tried to hold it together, to live the reality that I had long dreamed of stepping into, my grasp continued to slip. I was becoming known in the community as Fee, this interesting, theatrical, sociable, committed and unique individual. As I was forced back into the world that I had so long inhabited once more, through the revolving doors of the emergency department, I felt the sting of defeat, and stories of failure echoed through my psyche. As I lay on my tear-soaked pillow for many hours at a time in the weeks that followed, I fought familiar demons that attempted to convince me that it was pointless trying to live because I would never be free of this much shamed and often maligned reality. It was a very old and very familiar tape, but it still held so much persuasive power. I once more became convinced that I would never be able to offer anything but brokenness to the world. When I was first diagnosed at 19, there had been no comprehensive assessment. While I was unconscious and recovering from an overdose, psychiatrists and toxicologists discussed my history with my parents, and I was discharged from hospital with a label. By the time I had reached my first visit with my psychiatrist, I had read about this label and described myself to him in terms of its symptoms. I was told that understanding myself according to this label and taking the drug treatment as prescribed in the mid-90s would help me to live a full and meaningful life. That having a mental health label was not the write-off that it used to be. Not long after that, another psychiatrist told me that I would never be able to fly because crossing international timelines could trigger manic episodes. By then, I had returned to uni and I was studying a creative arts degree as a voice major. Dreams of performing on London's West End and Broadway began to falter. 3 months after I was married and discovered I was pregnant with our first child, I was told that I should defer uni because being pregnant and studying at the same time would make me unwell. Narratives of fragility continue to tug at the edges of that original promise of hope. 23 years on, as I persist in testing the realm of what is possible against the realm of what I am told is possible, I continue to be amazed at how many of us are still sold these conflicting messages, and at the strength of those who refuse to buy them. Mental health stigma is not just about the way the world is taught to see us. It's about the way that the world teaches us to see ourselves. So much of mental health stigma is wrapped up in assumptions that this thing that we struggle with should be the thing that defines us. And yet, I have become so grateful to have known some incredible mental health advocates over the years who have challenged me, increasingly challenged me, to turn that stigma on its head. I hear people who have struggled with mania talking about the creativity and energy that is embedded in this. People who struggle with acute emotional sensitivity, who see these personality disorders in terms of the strengths and not deficits. People who recognise that anxiety is their brain signalling them to slow down and focus on what is controllable in the face of real and adaptive responses to adversity. People who understand that the depression that they walk with is the outworking of an individual who goes more deeply into their emotions than many others dare to. People who have learned to listen to the voices in their head and what they're really trying to tell them. Creative, empathic, adaptive, sensitive, and uncomfortably honest souls who have learned to see that what we have been told is maladaptive actually reveals incredible sources of resilience. One of the hardest battles in the recovery journey for me has not been in accepting the stigmatised ways I have been responded to. My earlier drafts of this story were rife with self-blame, and as I floated them in the rehearsal space, I knew that I was continuing to perpetuate a stigmatised narrative towards myself. We are some of the best advocates for systemic social change, and yet we silence ourselves by believing that we will ultimately hurt and destroy. The greatest change is wrought when we stand and say, this is a narrative that I will no longer allow myself to be shaped by. This is the change that I choose to make. So this is my brave. I am a strong, independent, creative, passionate dreamer that is always willing to think outside the box, that feels just about everything in the emotive repertoire, and sometimes thinks way too deeply. I am resilient. I'm sheer bloody-minded and sometimes impossible. I finally understand why the neurodiversity that develops in the face of trauma is such an incredible gift. I will no longer limit myself or be limited by it. You may think that I am mad, but that's okay, because I am, and I'm proud of it.
Thank you, Fee.